Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now a few weeks ago we compared the once high-end GTX 1080 to the modern lower cost RTX 3050 and found that both cards traded blows when it came to running modern games. Today we're going to be taking a look at Nvidia's once popular mid-range GTX 1660 Ti and seeing how that holds up in comparison to the 3050. Now the 3050, when it was reviewed, I noticed that some sites called it the RTX 1660 Ti because on paper it shared similar performance. The only difference was of course that the 3050 offers support for DLSS and hardware-based ray tracing. You can enable ray tracing on the 1660 Ti, but if you watched yesterday's video, you'll know it's quite disastrous unless you implement some really heavy FSR. In today's one then, we're going to take a look at a few modern titles, see how the 1660 Ti holds up with its 6 gigs of GDDR6 in comparison to the 8GB 3050, because if you want to save £100 or thereabouts here in the UK and you don't really care for these modern features, you just want to run titles at native res, you may want to know if it's worth saving a little bit of money and going for the older and slightly what I am going to assume is the less capable card in 2023, but it will definitely be interesting to see just how much of a difference there is between these two, and perhaps the results are going to be closer than we're expecting. Now our first game is Call of Duty Warzone at 1080p with the Ultra preset for both cards today. Here the RTX 3050 pulled ahead. We do have to remember though that we do have access to modern upscaling techniques with this one, though the 1660 Ti can of course still make use of FSR where possible. Now we're not going to be using any of that today. This is a straight up native res and stock settings comparison, so to speak. Here 1080p native, ultra preset, nothing else changed apart from depth of field and motion blur. The 1660 Ti came in with 68 FPS, whereas the 3050 scored ever so slightly higher with 74. The percentile lows were also better with the 3050. As you'll soon see, things are about to change. In The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt with the next gen patch applied, the 1660 Ti actually pulled ahead. It was only 1 frame per second, so I'd say this is well within a margin of error. The 1% low was also identical, and in terms of that 0.1% low, well, the 1660 Ti pulled ever so slightly ahead. Once again, this is all with the high settings and TAAU enabled. Still, both cards are going to offer a pretty much identical experience, and it's an experience that is more than playable with these settings at this resolution. Forza Horizon 5 is a very well optimised game. Here the 1660 Ti pulled off 71 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 62 and a 0.1% low of 61. No stutter to speak of here. This runs really smoothly with this once mid-range card. On the other hand, we have the 3050, which was faster by about 7 frames on average, and once again the percentile lows were also a bit better, but on both occasions the performance was more than playable. Very nice at 1080p. 1080p is definitely where both of these cards are best suited. They can both handle 1440p with reduced settings, of course, but I'd stick with 1080p if I was building a gaming rig using either of these. In Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered at 1080p with the high preset and any ray tracing options turned off, we have another very close result with the 3050 pulling ever so slightly ahead with 95 frames per second. The 1.1% lows were also better. I noticed a bit more stutter with the older 1660 Ti. This is something I also picked up on when we were testing the 1080 in comparison to the 3050. The 1080 stuttered a little bit more, if I remember correctly. I hope I haven't got that backwards, but there we are. That may just be due to the older architecture of the card, or it could just be due to the lesser VRAM amount, but it could be down to all manner of things really. On average though, performance was very similar, very good for both. Now Cyberpunk 2077 was the one that I was most concerned about. I didn't think either of these cards would actually handle at least 60 FPS with the settings I chose and without any DLSS or FSR enabled, but the 1660 Ti managed 62 with solid percentile figures, 50 and 46 respectively, and the 3050 edged ever so slightly ahead with an average of 66 and percentile lows of 54 and 50. A very nice set of results if you ask me. And like I said at the start, if you don't care about these modern features, then the 1660 Ti is still a very capable card. And here in the UK, it's about £100, or let's say anywhere from £50 to £100 cheaper on second-hand sites like eBay, depending on the model you go for. In Hogwarts Legacy, well, this is a very troublesome game. It loves to eat all of your RAM and VRAM. However, both of these cards managed medium settings with pretty decent percentile lows. I don't know if there's been a recent update or whether it's because I'm using pretty modest settings here, but both cards managed solid figures. 69 FPS, nice for the 1660 Ti with a 1% low of 50 and a 0.1% low of 41. The 3050 on the other hand, 75 FPS, ever so slightly higher, well, quite noticeably high there, 6 frames on average here with a 1% low of 52 and a 0.1% low of 40. So in terms of those percentile figures, there really isn't much to talk about. It's definitely with the average that the performance differences are most notable. This pretty much goes for most of the games tested today as well. Next up and finally we have Red Dead Redemption 2 at 1080p. Usually I go with the console equivalent settings, but I decided to go with the ultra textures and choose medium for everything else. Both cards once again came within a few frames of each other. The 1% low was very slightly better, within a margin of error probably, on the 1660 Ti, and the 0.1% low actually swung back in favour of the 3050. Again, this could be due to the newer architecture, but I think if you want 3050-like performance, even in 2023, you don't care about DLSS, and you don't care about ray tracing, then a 1660 Ti is still a solid choice if you want to save a bit of money. I think moving forward, the extra VRAM of the 3050 will definitely help. I think that's been proved in a few modern releases, but a lot of the games that come out at the moment shouldn't or aren't really representative of what you should expect to see in the long run. I think there's been a few, let's say, hit and misses in terms of well-optimized games, and they're not really a good example of how VRAM is going to become a problem. I think 6 gigs is still fine on a card like the 1660 Ti. The price difference might start to get a bit bigger as well, but driver support, well, it'll eventually get dropped for the older card, of course, but as of here and now, the 1660 Ti can still keep up with the 3050 on most occasions, falling within or slightly short of it by about 2 to 8 frames depending on the game, though there will be outliers to this rule. Thank you very much for watching then. Let me know what you think of these results and the video down below in the comments. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, leave a dislike if you didn't. I think for the money you can save, the 1660 Ti is still a very good option, even if we disregard the 3050 completely. In its own right, the 1660 Ti is still a very solid GPU for 1080p gaming. Let me know if you agree or disagree down below. Hopefully, I'll see all of you in the next one.